Chapter 4 Mina Visits Whitby. Passages from Mina's Murray's Journal. July 24. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever. We went directly to the Crescent Inn, a lovely place. Between the inn and the town is an old church with a big graveyard full of tombstones. Strangely, I think this is the nicest place in Whitby. Has a full view of the harbor and the bay, where the headland stretches out into the sea. There are pleasant walking paths lined with benches all through the churchyard. All day long, people sit here looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. This will be a lovely vacation with Lucy and her mother. I'm worried about Jonathan, though. He left England many weeks ago. At first, he wrote every day about his trip and about Transylvania. Then suddenly, his letters stopped. I hope and pray he's not in any danger. July 25th. Lucy and I sat in the churchyard for a while today, enjoying the view. She too told me all over again about Arthur and their coming marriage. That made me just a little heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan in more than 2 months. I wonder where he is and if he's thinking of me. With all my heart, I wish he were here right now. July 26. It is so helpful for me to express my worries in this journal. It's like whispering to myself and listening at the same time. I'm concerned about both Lucy and Jonathan. Although he seems well, Lucy has lately taken to her old habit of walking in her sleep. Her mother's spoken to me about it. We've decided that I'm to lock the door of our room every night. Mrs. Westerna has read that sleepwalkers may sometimes go out on roofs of houses and along the edges of cliffs. If they are suddenly awakened, they are said to fall over with a despairing cry. Poor dear. She is naturally worried about Lucy. She tells me that her husband, Lucy's father, had the same habit. Lucy is to be married in autumn, and she is already planning how her house will be arranged. I enjoy doing the same thing. Jonathan and I, however, will begin our married life in a very simple way. We shall have to try hard to make ends meet. Lucy's fiancé, Arthur Holmwood, is coming here for a visit. I think Lucy is counting the minutes until he arrives. She wants to take him up to our favorite bench on the churchyard cliff. There's no better place to show him the beauty of Whitby. July 27th. No news from Jonathan. I'm getting quite uneasy. I do wish he would write, if only a single line. Lucy has been sleepwalking more than ever. Each night I'm awakened by her moving about the room. August 3rd. Another week gone and no news from Jonathan. Oh, I do hope he's not ill. Lucy's still walking in her sleep. She tries the door and, finding it locked, goes around the room looking for the key. August 6th. Another 3 days and no news. If only I knew what was happening, I'd feel better. Last night the weather was threatening. The fishermen say we are in for a storm. Huge gray clouds are piling up like giant rocks. The fishing boats are racing for home. They rise and dip in the high waves as if to sweep into the harbor. August 7th. Whitby has just experienced one of the greatest storms in its history. It started a little after midnight. First, there was a strange sound from over the sea. Then the storm broke. Wild winds turned the sea into a roaring monster. Soon the giant waves broke over the piers and swept over the lighthouses. Then thick fog came drifting in, so damp and cold it seemed almost eerie. At times we could glimpse the sea churning in the glare of the lightning. Loud thunder seemed to make the sky tremble. One ship had a lot of trouble getting in. Many of us watched it struggle from the beach. Finally, leaping from wave to wave, the ship entered the harbor and was pitched up on the beach. The searchlight guiding in revealed a horrible sight. Tied to the helm was a corpse. No other form could be seen on deck. Great awe came over all of us who were watching on the beach. As if by a miracle, the ship had found the harbor, steered by the hand of a dead man. As soon as the ship touched the shore, a big dog jumped up from the deck from below. It leaped from the bow onto the sand. Then it ran for the cliff that lies below the church graveyard, and it disappeared. Later, it was found that the dead man at the helm was tightly holding a crucifix. A bottle containing a little roll of paper was found in his pocket. The pocket proved to be part of the ship's log. A doctor said that the man must have been dead for 2 days. August 9th. The tale told in the ship's log was startling. It turned out that the boat had come from Russia. Its only cargo was a number of large wooden boxes filled with dirt. This cargo was addressed to a lawyer named Thomas Sneeling, who has his offices here in Whitby. The dog that jumped off the ship seems to have disappeared entirely. No doubt the poor thing was frightened and is hiding somewhere in terror. Early this morning, a big dog belonging to a local coal merchant was found dead. The poor animal must have been in a fight. Its throat was torn away, and its belly was slit open as if by a savage claw. The ship's log told a terrible story. The crew had reported to the cabin that a strange man was on board. Oddly, the stowaway was seen only at night. Since the ship had booked no passengers, this was a great mystery. Then the members of the crew started disappearing one by one. They always disappeared at night while on watch. Soon, only the captain was left. August 11th, 3:00 a.m. Can't sleep now, so I may as well write. Last night, I fell asleep easily. Then in the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up with a horrible sense of fear upon me. Lucy was gone. The door was shut, but not locked, as I had left it. I threw on some clothes and went to look for her. She was nowhere in the house. I ran outside and looked toward our favorite bench in the churchyard. The silver light of the moon struck a half-reclining figure on the bench. Something tall and dark bent over a snowy white figure. I ran toward the churchyard as fast as I could. As I got closer, I called out, "Lucy! Lucy!" A dark figure raised its head. From where I was, I could see its white face and red, gleaming eyes. Lucy did not answer, and I ran closer. Then a cloud blocked the light of the moon for a minute or so. When the cloud passed, I could see Lucy's head tipped back on the back of the bench. She was quite alone. There was no sign of any living thing about. She seemed to be asleep, but as I came nearer to her, she pulled the collar of her nightdress close around her throat. She shuddered, as if feeling cold. Put my shawl around her and fastened it at her throat with a big pin. Then I woke her up and helped her back to the house. Safe in her bed, Lucy quickly went back to sleep. After asking me not to tell her mother about her sleepwalking, knowing the poor state of her mother's health, I agreed. August 11th, noon. Lucy is still asleep. I was sorry to notice that I must have been clumsy when pinning the shawl last night. The skin of her throat is pierced in 2 places. When I apologized, said she did not even feel it. Luckily, it will not leave a scar, as the marks are so tiny. August 12th. Lucy tried to sleepwalk twice last night. I'm glad I remembered to lock the door. I still haven't heard from Jonathan. What can be wrong? August 14th. After dinner, Lucy had a headache and went to bed early. I went out for a walk along the cliffs. As I arrived back home, I looked up at our window. I saw Lucy's head leaning out the window and I waved at her. She did not notice me. Just then, the moonlight fell on her, and I could see that Lucy's head was on the windowsill and her eyes shut. Next to her, seated on the windowsill, was something that looked like a big bird. Thinking she might get a chill, I hurried upstairs. She said she was just sleepwalking back to bed. But I noticed that she was holding her hand on her throat, as if to protect it from cold. August 15th. Lucy seems very tired. She slept late again today, and Mrs. Westerna gave me some bad news that her own health is getting worse. Dr. Seward says that she has heart problems. August 17th. Still no news from Jonathan. Lucy seems to be getting weaker, and so does her mother. Do not understand why Lucy is so frail. She eats well, sleeps well, and enjoys the fresh air, yet the color in her cheeks is fading. I looked at her throat just now as she lay asleep. The tiny wounds from the pin seem not to have healed. If anything, they're larger than before. I think I should have Dr. Seward look at him. August 19th, joy, 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 but not all joy. At least news of Jonathan. The dear fellow has been ill. That's why he did not write. For 6 weeks he's been in hospital in Budapest, suffering from brain fever. The nun who wrote me the letter said that he's been delirious. He's been talking about wolves and poison and blood and of ghosts and demons. I'll leave Whitby in the morning and go to nurse him. Then I'll bring him home. August 24th. The trip to Budapest was tiring, but I didn't care, for I would be with Jonathan at last. When I finally got to him, I found him pale and weak-looking. He's a wreck of himself. He says he does not remember anything of the past few months. I know he wants me to believe this, so I won't ask any questions. But he has had some terrible shock. That's easy to see. We decided to be married right away, and we were, right in the hospital. Jonathan sat up in bed, propped up the pillows. He answered his "I will" firmly and strongly. I could hardly speak. I was so happy. I am Jonathan's wife at last, Mina Harker. As soon as Jonathan is better, we'll go back to Whitby Lucy and Arthur are planning to be married on September 28th. I am sure we will be there then.